I'm trying oysters and rating them 1 to 10 based on my personal preference. The first one I got was Pink Moons, and I got them from the Real Oyster Cult. Something really neat about these ones, for every bag you buy, $2 is donated to breast cancer research. They actually come from Raspberry Point Oysters, which is an oyster farm in PEI. Now, right away I noticed it was the oyster was on the smaller side, which it's okay. I normally prefer like a 3-inch oyster, but these smaller ones can be okay for me too. What I really loved about this oyster was how easy it was to shuck. I got my knife right in there on the hinge and was able to get it right away. And look how beautiful and clean this oyster shucked when I was all done. I am not a professional shucker by any means, but it was even easy for me. So shuckability, definitely high on this one. Taking a look at the meat, I also like how the meat filled up most of the shell, and it was super easy to just cut the abductor muscle right there to be ready to slurp it down. Now, I kind of had high hopes for this one based on how plump it looked and everything like that, and it didn't disappoint. For being a small oyster, it had a lot of flavor, good salty umami, and a little bit of sweet. I'm going to give it an 8.1 overall. This is a series where I try different oysters and rate them 1 to 10, and today I'm going to try 3 island oysters from Beals, Maine. I got these again from the Real Oyster Cult. I have one of their subscriptions, so I get 3 different oysters every single month. Now, looking at this oyster right away, I noticed it was a good size, right around 3 inches. What I also noticed too, it didn't have a very deep cup, and I like a deep cup oyster so you can really hold some of that liquid in there. When I went ahead and started chucking it on the hinge, it was a little more difficult than the other ones I've shucked, just because I felt like that hinge was giving way. But after a little bit of persuasion, I was able to get it open, and I was able to cut away the top shell pretty cleanly from that bottom part. So I was pretty happy with overall how it shucked, but I wish those hinges were just a little bit more sturdy because it makes it a lot easier to open. Now, looking at the oyster, I was a little disappointed. I thought there would be more meat inside the shell. It doesn't really fill up the whole shell, but I was still excited to try anyways. And as I tasted it, it was good. It was a little bit salty, a little bit sweet, but overall, it lacked the umami and the depth of flavor I really like in oysters. So overall, I'm going to give it a 6.9. This is a series where I try different oysters from around the nation and rate them 1 to 10. Today I'm trying Pink Lady Oysters, and they come from Barnstable, Massachusetts. Again, these were ones I got in my Real Oyster Cult subscription, and this is the last one I actually get for the October month. So this will be the last tasting of these East Coast oysters. West Coast oysters are coming soon. So looking at the oyster, it was that good 3.25 inch size, which I really like. It had a nice deep cup, which is a big plus. Getting the knife in there, I felt like it was getting in the hinge really well, and it was going to be easy to shuck, but you're going to see what happens really quick here. A little bit of the fragment of shell pops off. Most of the time when something like that happens, you got to be careful when you put the knife back into the hinge because it can be a little bit brittle. That comes from the oyster growing really fast, and sometimes that makes that shell brittle. Now, opening it up, I could see that the meat filled up most of the shell, which was really nice. I was actually really excited about eating this one, and it didn't disappoint. It was a really solid oyster. It had a little bit of sweet, not much umami, a good amount of salt, and based on my personal preference, I'm going to give this a 7.4 out of 10. This is a series where I try different oysters, and today I'm trying some oysters from the West Coast. These are Hamama Oysters, grown in Washington State. And I got to admit, the West Coast oysters I've tried before, I really didn't like. They had that cucumbery taste, and that's just not my thing. But so many people recommended them, I had to try them. So taking a look at them, they're about 3 inches. Again, a perfect size, a nice deep cup to them. And so then I got my knife, and I was really surprised how easily this thing shucked. They had a great hinge. The shell didn't flake at all. It was super easy to open. Now, I kind of messed up here on the side opening it up. You see I just popped it open there. But looking inside, the oyster filled up most of the shell, which is a really good sign. I cleaned it up, got the grit out, and got it ready to eat. And I gotta say, I was a little nervous I wasn't gonna like these, but as soon as I tried it, I was pretty impressed. It tasted a lot different than I expected. None of that cucumber taste, a good umami, some salt. I gotta say, overall, based on everything, this is a solid 8 out of 10 for me. This is a series where I try different oysters from around the nation, and today I'm trying Blue Pool Oysters from the Hamama Oyster Company out there in Washington. Now, I've said this previously, I'm actually not a big fan of West Coast oysters, but the first ones that I tried from Hamama Oyster Company were actually pretty good, and I ended up giving one a 9. So I put on my glove, I was excited to try this one. All the other oysters that I've liked from Hamama didn't have that like cucumbery taste that a lot of West Coast oyster have. So I was hopeful I would like this one as well. Now, I gotta say, it was super easy to shuck. The knife went right into the hinge. I was able to get the shell open without much breakage. It had a nice deep cup, 2.5 inches. Overall, a pretty solid oyster. Now it's just coming down to taste. If it has that cucumber taste, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to rate it low because it's just not how I like my oysters to taste. Go ahead and cut the adductor muscle right there and get it ready to slurp. I gave it a chew so I could taste all the complex flavors oysters can have, and right away I could tell it had that cucumber taste that some West Coast oysters have, and that's just not my style. 6.9 out of 10 is what I'm going with.